Think about it. The only thing that you should seek to improve is yesterday's version of Cooper. The question changes when we're in the WTF moment. The question is not, why is this happening to me? The question is, why is this happening for me? And I think that pain is a gift, because pain gives us an opportunity to pause. At least it gives us heightened state of awareness. And that's really what you need to have before you're going to make any kind of change. You first have to be aware. In life, a lot of things come with expiration dates. And people and myself have struggled with recognizing when it's time to release something. I'm not saying toss out. I'm just saying there are parts of ourselves that need to be released. Getting fired is not the worst thing in a career, as far as I'm concerned. You know what I think is? I think that getting comfortable is far more dangerous than getting let go.
We have very different viewpoints on many things.
But a lot of these issues are American issues. They're not Republican or Democrat issues.
Welcome back to Elevated Thoughts, the podcast that's working to restore productive discourse between left and right. I'm your host, Cooper Simmons, joined as always by our co-host and producer, Mike Marrow. Today, we have the opportunity to sit down with someone who's helping people reframe their hardest moments into something powerful. Danielle Sprouls is a former attorney, corporate executive, and now the author of the new book, WTF, Women That Flourish. It's a guide for turning life's what the fuck moments into transformational pivots, whether you're burned out, stuck in a role that no longer fits you, or you're just trying to figure out what comes next. This is what you could turn to. So we're going to talk about her own journey, walking away from her high-powered career, and what it really does mean to flourish when when everything feels like WTF. So this actually, I want to start, Danielle, by saying, welcome to the show. How are you?
No, I'm doing great. Thank you. We've already had a few minutes of laughs before we came on here.
So we loosened up. But I wanted to say, I was a little hesitant to pick up the book just because of the title, Women That Flourish. But then I noticed that the men section in there is actually grayed out. So
yeah,
we will be honest with you, we have a mostly male audience on the podcast. Does this appeal to men, this book?
I don't know. Do men have WTF moments? You tell me, gentlemen. I think the answer to that is absolutely yes. The reason that Women That Flourish is the tagline under the WTF is because it was the very first WTF that came into my life. And what I mean by that was I had a podcast called Unscripted Pivots, where I was, just interviewing women for the most part, talking about all the different ways that they got to hear from there. And I wanted to talk to them about their WTF moments, but I didn't want to be offensive. I didn't want to alienate. And plus, I was tied to corporate America, and I felt that I had to have a certain kind of, corporate persona at the time. So I said, what can WTF be, right? Because that's what we want to talk about, the unscripted pivots. And so that's what I came up with, Women That Flourish. And so from there began the WTF framework, because once people saw that I was giving a new acronym to WTF and I was redefining what a WTF moment could look like, it just took off. I mean, it just took off like, wildfire. It was never something I intended to create. It just took into like a movement of its own. And I'm having such a blast with it. People are WTFing me all day long. We are talking and exchanging. You can play like verbal tennis with the WTFs, right? And turn it into something that is actually positive and empowering. And what's beautiful about this is that it brings levity, joy, some humor into those disruptive moments where we could feel otherwise overwhelmed. So I'm saying we're going to go through it, just laugh on the way.
Yeah. And just for our listeners, what you're referring to is in every chapter, you are loading it up with acronyms for WTF. And it was interesting. I mean, I will say I made it more than halfway through the book, and I've planned on finishing it because it definitely resonates with me. Everybody has WTF moments, like you're saying. There's no one thing in there that is for women specifically. And I think it appeals to a broad audience. I mean, there are many, many times where I'm overwhelmed. I'm done with one thing or the other. And I don't know if I've ever really thought to do that pivot like you described, which seems really like out there, really a high level to say, I'm giving up the old me and I'm going to become the new me. So I have to imagine that you have a moment in your life that made you say, what the fuck? And
more than once, my friend, more than once, more than once. The book came into fruition after one of my most recent WTF moments, which was, well, now Michael's having one right during the podcast. The light goes
Absolutely.
flying.
Listen,
Okay.
but I'm gonna take this chaos, turn it constructive, and I'm gonna
That's right.
flourish with
Just
it.
turn it around, buddy. So, in 2023, I had experienced two things when it came to my career, which at the time was in commercial title insurance. And so I'd been doing that for a couple decades, and I was highly successful. I closed over like $20 billion of commercial real estate in that time. And I was, predominantly in Manhattan before I moved to California. But lo and behold, two things happened. One, the firm I was with, even though I was in California, I was still working for an agency in New York. And they were acquired by a large mortgage company. And so, lo and behold, that company's business model was purely residential. And they had no need for the commercial division, which was across the whole country. So I was included in that, as were my superiors, the people I reported to. So pretty much overnight, when that the letter was signed, we were all let go. Now, that was never a catastrophic moment for me when these kind of things would happen. It wasn't the first time something like that happened in my life. But when you're in sales and you're a producer, you'll get picked up pretty damn quick. And that's exactly what happened. I was unhappy because of the lying that I guess is like from a corporate standpoint necessary. They had to kind of keep it under wraps that what was going to
Right.
happen. So I get that. But nonetheless, it stung because there's a disbandment of all the people that you've been working with and that you really like. So all of a sudden you're not going to be this corporate family. So that kind of stunk. But so that happened. And then like within the same day, I was hired immediately by another insurance company. And so that's not surprising, but I said yes. And when I look back at that time, it really was more of a reaction than a response.
Hmm.
And I believe in being responsive, not reactive, but I didn't in that moment. And I took a job that for all intents and purposes looked really great on paper. And I was so excited to report to the leader of the office that I said yes to. And all that changed. And so the WTF moment became when the person I was reporting to was gone in about 6 weeks because she got promoted, and God bless that, and she deserved it. When leadership changed and the culture changed, and simultaneously, California Commissioner of Insurance and decided that they would expand how they interpret SB 133, which is a rule that governs like what we can and can't do. I had to step down from a board position that was very near and dear to my heart. So you had simultaneously one company that I really loved and I'd been working for get acquired, boom, we're gone. Same day I get hired and I say yes to the boss I think I'm going to work for. Now she's not there. Danielle, step down from your presidency and all these things. I was like WTF like all day long. And so that lasted a few months. I was contractually obligated to stay. And what I mean by that, if I was going to leave that office and say goodbye to that job, it was going to cost me a lot of money to break my contract. And I didn't want to pay them $50,000 to say goodbye. I didn't want that. So
Sure.
I waited until they did, and I did my job, but I was under a lot of emotional strain, to say the least. So from there, I wrote this book because what that did was it paved the way. It wasn't a response to that being let go so much as all of a sudden I had time to sit with my thoughts, reflect back on what I'd been talking about around the WTF language, and just share it with other people because I too was experiencing what I coach most people on, which is like, when things change. Now, not everybody I coach is getting fired. A lot of them, they're leveling up and they're trying to say, how do I step into this role? It's just like that moment in time when there's a transition and you need that accountability partner, you need that guidance, and you need somebody to brainstorm with so you can access the tools you probably have in your kit already, but that you just can't find or you don't know which one. And I think it's like pretty cool to admit that you're unsure. I think the worst thing we can do is to pretend, right? Extend and pretend that nothing is
Hmm.
really going wrong and think we're going to do it all by our big bad selves, because sometimes that just doesn't work. And once you have that realization and you accept that as truth, you're on your way to you can catapult your career, your life, all of it. And so that WTF moment, was one of the biggest last ones that I had, but I've had several. I've had many.
I,
Yeah.
I I think Trailblazer doesn't do it justice for you. It was very interesting reading kind of your origin story, right? I think
Yeah.
it's what a lot of us share, right? I went to school, got a degree in psychology, started as pre-med, and I think we all have this kind of idea that life is supposed to be very linear. You got to have this big, long, grand plan. But I think your story is really beautiful because it's always about having that plan and being willing to adapt to change. I think first it was motherhood, and then it was followed by two or three different, career changes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think where a lot of us struggle with is what is kind of the emotional and mental toolkit that we need in those crisis moments? And crisis not necessarily a bad way, but you talk about how it's a time to reflect and kind of reframe ourselves, right? So
Well,
what are some
yeah.
tools we
I
can start
mean,
using?
there's, first of all, when something's going on, there's usually discomfort, right? Sometimes there's pain. And I think that pain is a gift because pain gives us an opportunity to pause. At least it gives us heightened state of awareness. And that's really what you need to have before you're going to make any kind of change. You first have to be aware, and then you slip into something like what I call acceptance. Now, acceptance of the situation, and I want to stress this, s- acceptance doesn't mean approval. Okay. You don't
Sure.
have to be on board with what's going on. Okay. Nobody's looking. The universe is not asking you to approve of a situation. We don't control people, places, and things. We can only control our response. But once you are aware and then you accept, then you can move into action. And one of the things that I find that a lot of people struggle with, and I have myself been in the same position, is after that pause, are we giving ourselves permission to evolve, to make that next step? Because too often we get caught up on looking for somebody else's approval or suggestion and something like that. And you must give yourself permission to do something. It doesn't even matter how much encouragement you get around you. You have to give yourself the permission, and then the pivot could follow. And at the core of the WTF book is really about pivoting. It's not about the WTF moment. I'm just putting a lot of WTF language around the pivot, right? Every chapter, there's 12 chapters in the book, and every chapter has a WTF name, right? So we start out like, what's the framework, right? Because I talk about the relationship between the WTF moment and the pivot and how they're really like a bridge. And we talk about wake that flame, win tiny first, right? Because you've got to take small steps in the right direction that build momentum. We talk in the book about, one of my favorite chapters is Worth the Fear. And I originally was going to call that chapter, What's the Fear? And after I'd written it, I took a look at it and I said, my message is more that it's worth it because you're going to
Hmm.
experience it when you stretch. It's worth the fear. Now, there are two chapters that seem female specific because one is called Women That Flourish, because again, that was the very first WTF, and I'll always pay
Right.
homage to that. And there was also a chapter in there, if you remember, chapter 7, which it says Women Thriving Financially. Well, men can have the same tools, but what I'm saying in that chapter is more around what is the power play that you live or have lived between money and power. Because there's a lot of personal stories that I share within that book, really to demonstrate where I got this way of thinking or how far I've come since, what was the earlier version of me, and the mistakes that I repeated in my life in different packages, not understanding that I was actually perpetuating a bad cycle because the details were a little different. So I will tell you something. I wrote this book to share with others ways that they can get through transition in a fun kind of like a happier, more productive way. But the healing that writing that book brought me, I wasn't even aware that needed that. I mean, it really impacted me in the same way. And it was a pleasure, but to write, but it was also quite the undertaking because in the book, I'm visiting people that are no longer here, like my mother and my grandmother, and then old versions of me, like with the first marriage. What were the choices I was making? What was the choices I was making when the kids were younger? I have four, as you know. And I have no regrets about anything because everything has brought me to here. But what I hope to do is like when I know better, to do better.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So it sounds like this book, while it was written for people to help them, it was also written as a little bit catharsis for you as well to go through it.
Hmm.
You mentioned in your speech there that you said that small wins are kind of the way to step into this framework that you've developed. And I'm a person who tends to dwell on bad news sometimes, and I can get
Hmm.
down in the dumps for days at times. And I would think if I lost my job, if I lost my house, if I lost my passion board seat or whatever it may be, I would feel paralyzed. I would feel like, how can I even wake up rather than pivot to a whole new endeavor? And so how do you
Well,
help people like that, that are really just kind of unable to even cope with what's happening here. I know the acceptance, but what would be next?
So, it's all we start out with the pause, right? We look at like what's going on right now and the feelings associated with it, and not just the details of the current situation, because a lot of times, if you're feeling overwhelmed or feeling a certain emotion like fear, what's hysterical is historical. We go back, there is a therapeutic component to all of it. We go back as to why you're reacting the way you're reacting. To the moment. And then we do like a pattern audit. Like, where are you saying yes when you really should be saying no? All
Mm,
these things around that. I mean, it runs very, very deep. I'll tell you what, getting fired is not the worst thing in a career as far as I'm concerned. You know what I think is? I think that getting comfortable is far more dangerous than getting let go. Because when you get let go, there's a sense of urgency there. And then that puts you into a moment of like, I have to reassess my life. When you are comfortable, a couple things can happen. And the worst, I believe, is like the complacency that surrounds just like, you can almost like slowly drift away from your purpose. I see this
mhm,
all the time. And you may not know that you've outgrown the role. Even when the job doesn't outgrow you, you can have outgrown it. And it's this inner understanding that things just don't fit anymore. They don't feel right. But we feel because that on paper they're not working, we have to stay. And you know
mhm.
what? There's a whole chapter, WTF, work toward fulfillment. I believe in alignment more than I do believe in titles. And, if alignment doesn't always match what you were taught to do.
Mhm.
I love that word. I'm going to toss it back to you, Mike. But the word fulfillment, fulfillment. That's the word my wife is constantly using.
Yeah,
And she's an eighth grade special ed teacher, and she's always, from day one as being a teacher, she's always felt fulfillment. I work in the
yeah.
elevator industry. I'm an elevator contractor, and I don't want to overshare, but in the elevator world, people are like, "Are you fulfilled? Do you love it?" Like, not really. Just an elevator. It's a machine.
Mm,
So I don't really get that sense of fulfillment. Do I feel aligned? Yes, but what you just said resonated with me in that I'm comfortable and I feel fine.
mm,
If I were to let go, I definitely would get a fire lit under my butt. I don't want that to happen if you're listening,
no.
boss. But it's interesting that you use that word fulfillment, because that's something that I would expect to see in a women that flourish book, but I don't know that you would see that in a men that flourish book always, because it's not something that has driven me. So
Well
it's
well, maybe the word fulfillment and the word flourish don't really resonate with, like, the male audience, but, we're talking more about satisfaction. Do you feel satisfied? Do you feel recognized? And I don't think that the job has to be the only thing that fulfills us. There are plenty of people that are satisfied in their job and the paycheck is good and they're living up to their responsibilities, which is like super important. Okay. I'll never discount that. I'm not saying run away from something you don't enjoy, right? No, we need to be responsible. There are other ways to be fulfilled in life. And so a lot of times when I am coaching somebody, they're I'm not counseling them to leave, and sometimes they come right in like, "I'm out of here," because they're, like, in a heightened state of, like, irritation, and I'm
Mhm.
like, "Let's slow your roll, okay? We're not here just to say we're tossing it out. Let's redefine what this can look like." Sometimes it's about changing some of your responsibilities within your job, and that's it, delegating certain things or adding more things. And then outside your job, it's like, what are you doing to be happy? And these
Right.
things don't have to be expensive sports or anything like that, but you need to, I call it white space, earmark, schedule moments and time so that you can, revitalize yourself in any which way. It could be just hiking, right? That costs $0. You're
Right.
out there with nature. It's just like, coming back into your own. There's plenty of inexpensive ways to get grounded and to feel better. And then, of course, we can't discount the fact that it's about your perspective and your attitude, right? A lot of times we're working on that and we're saying, are we looking at everything we don't have? Or are we simultaneously, let's start looking at what you do have, right? Because people forget that. We tend to focus on the pain and not
Right.
on the promise.
So I think while we're on the topic of pivoting, I think what's and on our wives here, because I think it's been a big pivot. Cooper now, they're how old is Chase? Almost just 2 now, right?
almost 21 months.
Yeah, mine just turned 11 months, so it's been a tremendous bit of change
Mm-hmm.
and required quite a big pivots, not only
Yeah.
on our wives, but our
Mm-hmm.
lives as well. I think your story is fascinating because you were carving out, your space in the world at a time when the workplace was a little less amicable towards, women and pregnancies and things like
For
that.
certain.
So what advice can you kind of give to mothers now? Because they're kind of in this dual role, right? They've had to pivot because a lot of them, in our senses, they have both the responsibility of bringing in income and parenting, And
Yeah.
again, Cooper and I, we definitely help out a lot. So it's not like we sit back and kick it, but it just feels like everybody has to pivot and go from being a professional to their personal life and being there with their kids. And, what is some advice you can give to us younger parents and moms out there who are trying to do it, to cut their teeth in this world?
Well, P stands for patience, right? I mean, you
Sure.
have to have and you know what? What I think is like, I don't think there's many things in life that changes like parenthood, right? And
Hmm.
I don't care how many books you can read in preparation of, right? I mean, that's just like a script. And then the reality hits and you never know what that's going to look like, what your child's going to come into the world being like. Some are colicky, some sleep, right? It's just the adaptability and the flexibility of being a parent that, that's what we have to remember. But you're right. When I when I was practicing law, I was newly married and I didn't have children, and it was after having like getting ready to have the second one that I didn't feel comfortable really in that role because
Right.
especially back in the 90s it was still heavily male dominated, and
Hmm.
the clothes you would wear, like these tent dresses, I just didn't feel like I looked professional, and I was married at the time to somebody who didn't want me to work. I mean, he was very traditional and we didn't need the money, and so I took a step back from that career. um but I didn't do it when I had the 4. I mean, once I had 4 and she was about a year and a half, I went into, unknowingly, to tell you the truth, one of the most demanding professions that I could have taken on. I had 0 idea what I was, going towards, and I think that was helpful because I would have run in the other direction. But I would have also deprived myself of the experiences that I've had to date, and it was very lucrative. And so there's a thing called golden handcuffs, right? When you start making like, 7 figures, it is very difficult to walk away from that when you know that you have 4 children and you have 4 colleges to, save for. I mean, that money was starting to get saved when they were very, very little, and not one
Hmm.
of them had to pay for any of those things. That was just very important to us. So we said, okay, this has been handed to us. Let's go with it. For women or men out there, I mean, you really, you have to understand that this is not you. It's the shedding of the old version of yourself and the embracing new. A lot of times we try to get the baby to fit our lifestyles or our personalities, right? And it just it doesn't work well. So I understand the sacrifices. All these choices come with sacrifices. Even the good blessings like being able to be a parent. Let's not forget, not everybody gets that blessing. Not everybody does. I was popping out babies like they were like, candy. I was like, whoa. I think I went back to work because I thought I was going to have 7. I had 4 kids in about 8 years. And I was like, I might have
Wow.
9 if I stay home,
Sure, sure.
put a little distance between me and the ex and I might be like,
Absolutely.
I might be safe. So, but what a ride that was. It's interesting. I come across young women in commercial real estate and they're climbing that ladder and they're all about, the career, and they've invested a lot of time and energy towards it. And then all of a sudden they're in the season where they're going to start having children. And
Hmm.
some of them go back to work and some of them don't. I've seen women swear up and down to me, "Oh, I'm going back to work. I absolutely will."
Yeah.
And I just said, it's great to have a vision. I don't believe in plans. I believe in planning. Plans are like, who are you kidding? Because life is full of these curveballs. But just give yourself the grace to accept that what you thought would happen may not happen and that that's okay. Because it's when we get rigid that we get really uncomfortable and we
Hmm.
can't even see the possibilities and the pivots that are there before us, right? So I just say don't be rigid about it. Like, have a vision and then just adapt. Just adapt with the flow.
On this show, we cover a lot of politics, left and right, obviously. And one of the things that's kind of culturally happening is the right is
Yeah.
moving further towards this traditionalism where the mother or the woman would stay at home and the father would earn the income. And
Hmm.
then you have the other side of the coin where more and more women are getting degrees than men. And they're even actually, some women are being accused of working too hard, right? And it's called like this hustle culture, or trying to get into these like traps of just having to be productive all the time.
Yeah,
I'm wondering, you mentioned that your ex was traditional. I'm wondering what your take
he
is on
was.
that.
He is. Um,
does that to you say that the woman there who decides to stay home is not working hard or not fulfilling their full potential? Or
oh,
is it to say that that's just not right for them?
um, Okay. First of all, being a full-time stay-at-home parent, whether you're male or female, is positively the hardest job ever. Okay. You never saw chaos like that in the making. I'm sorry, right? I mean,
I only have one.
you only have to have one. Okay.
Yeah.
You can no longer just leave the house and walk the dog. You can no longer take a shower without like making sure that baby's not in a position to kill itself. I mean, it is such a game changer, right? So hats off to everybody who stays at home. I don't think that they're abandoning their career or their purpose. I did that for about 8 years. I was a stay-at-home parent, and it was the right decision at the time. In chapter 7, Women Thriving Financially, I talk about why it was so important for me as a person, as a woman, to have a career where I could financially support myself. I saw both my grandmother get divorced and then later on my mother get divorced and pretty much be left without any kind of money because they were at the beck and call of the purse strings, which were the earners, which were traditionally the men. And when men, not men, but when the one who's got the wallet is pissed off, guess what? You are now trying to, through court and persuasion, trying to get your fair share, and it doesn't always work that way. So at a young age, I witnessed that, and I thought, no, I will absolutely have a job. And so that doesn't mean that it's right. What that means is that comes from a place of my trauma. I was conditioned in the other way. I never felt comfortable to be at the, I- it's not even power, but I will tell you, for even the time that I stayed home and we were financially comfortable, we weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. I never really enjoyed being said, like told no. And I was never a woman that was collecting purses or fancy shoes or anything. But let's say I wanted to go take the kids on vacation or do something. He'd be like, no, we can't really afford that because, we're one income. And I got tired of stuff like that. And I thought, you know what? I can earn money too. We don't have to worry about, can't afford a babysitter, which was all a bunch of BS, by the way, because we could. But, he was more frugal and I was more like spendy, so we were kind of opposite along those lines. But I wanted to be able to do what I wanted to do. And none of it's fancy. I just wanted to have independence. And I'm still very much like that. I mean, I'm married right now. My second husband, John, who I am just wild about, and you'll see that in the book a little bit. He's a golf pro. I mean, he's not on tour making millions. He's an instructor in Southern California. There's a ceiling on what they earn. He's extremely busy and he works his tail off because golf here is like crazy popular and the weather is very
Sure.
cooperative. It's 12 months a
Mhm.
year. But
Mhm.
still, but I never had a problem with that. I mean, I don't care about a guy out earning me, but lo and behold, I'm going to have enough of my own that I know that if I ever needed to walk away or if there was something I wanted to do, that I didn't have to worry about it, to tell you the truth, or, to burden somebody else with that decision or that obligation. I believe in holding my own. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
so different for every person. And I will echo with
Yeah,
my wife, who's been stay at home for the last 2 years, that it absolutely is the hardest job ever.
it's
And
very
and
hard.
one thing I will also acknowledge though is it's different for women to men. If I were to, let's say that she was the breadwinner and I were to offer to stay home, I think I would have a very different experience than her, just inherently biologically, how the
Absolutely.
baby reacts
Yeah.
in response to her. And so it's almost, the women are almost trapped in that way. They have to live as the mother and live as the professional if they say so choose, and it's not as possible or easy to pass that off to the father, in my opinion or experience.
No, I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, after all, we grow them. I mean, let's face it,
Yeah,
right? We literally grow them so they come from our body and there's something about that 9-month process that imprints not only us but also the baby. And
Yeah.
so, I would say that culturally, way back when the mother did stay home and I mean, I could see where that is the natural course of things. Like and there's nothing wrong with that. And you know what? Listen, if I was independently wealthy outside of my marriage, I probably would have stayed home. I don't feel like I have to work. I don't feel like I have to report to people, okay? I just feel that I have to maintain some sense of financial independence. That's all I'm talking about. It's not about leaving the children. That would have been a nice luxury to be able to do it. But I'm not going to lie to you. I was getting tired of being spit up on. I was getting tired of playing army men on the floor. I was getting tired
Mhm.
of not using my brain. And there's a lot of sacrifice around that. And so I wanted to offset it with what was going to be a part time position, which turned into a full fledged career that was very demanding, and I lived in New Jersey where that's where we were raising them, and I was commuting to Manhattan, and it was 2 hours each way. I mean, it was no joke between driving to the train station, taking the train, getting into New York, getting to Penn, then taking the subway over to Grand Central, and taking the shuttle over to Midtown. I mean, it was a haul. It was a haul and a half. I am a fast-paced person. I kind of, thrive in that kind of energy, but it did eventually take its toll because at some point you don't feel like doing it, but that doesn't matter when you're in it, right? So it was a real big decision in 2017 when we left the East Coast to move to the West Coast. I still worked for the East Coast, but just to come into California with that slower pace of
Hmm.
play and it was a nice reprieve. And that was already, after my fourth one was going to college. I didn't need a 7-bedroom house in New Jersey anymore. Nobody was even at that house. We were, traveling. I was in New York, and I said, this is downright silly. That's another thing too, that, in life, a lot of things come with expiration dates. And people and myself have struggled with recognizing when it's time to release something. I'm not saying toss out. I'm just saying there are parts of ourselves that need to be released. There's, relationships that we need to just let go. And in that surrender, you allow room in for the things that you're meant to become and to grow into. Because you can't be all the things. You can't be your old identity and your new identity. And it's not an abandonment. In a lot of ways, it's like a return to self in the purest form. Sometimes getting rid of the things that you piled on or learned, and you unlearn them, and now you are who you were always meant to be. I mean, it's very liberating. One of the things I talk about a lot is the question changes when we're in the WTF moment. The question is not, why is this happening to me? The question is, why is this happening for me? Now, somebody a long time ago came up with that. It wasn't me, but this is how I live my life. And when you sit with that for a second, it's really that there is so much richness in the data if you allow it to come. Yeah. And so when I'm coaching, this is the type of stuff that I sit with clients is or teams. What I really like to do is to go into businesses and coach teams because when you see like the collaborative energy or lack thereof, I mean, that's the juicy stuff. That's the juicy stuff, I live for that all day long. I really enjoy it.
I saw this today on Twitter. It's a Marcus Aurelius quote. It says, "Think of yourself as dead. You've already lived your life. Now take what's left and live it properly."
Yeah. Okay.
Which is interesting. It resonates with me. I always
Yeah.
am taking on new challenges, trying to start a new failing business or whatever it might be. But I
Hmm.
guess my question is, can people, in your opinion, still do this evolution process, still make this pivot without the destruction, without blowing up their life or eliminating their old self? All right. Because I've built a lot of skills. I don't want to throw that all away. I want to kind
I
of
don't,
build
I,
all
I
this
think
together.
I didn't throw away all the skills that I had when I moved into executive coaching and speaking. I'm a culmination of all of those things that I learned. I'm just not using them in the same way. So these are strengths that we don't abandon, right? We just shift on how they're utilized. So no, I don't think there's a tossing out per se, not at all. I do think that there's a shedding that involves certain habits that no longer serve us and certain people or relationships that should be tossed out. Yeah, for sure, on the way. But if you're seeking, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's easy to assume that when we're looking to start another thing or whatever, that maybe are we coming from a place of dissatisfaction? It's not always the case. It's curiosity. And I think that curiosity is a superpower. And I think that it gives people leverage provided they remain teachable. Because that's a whole nother level to this. You can be curious all day long, but if you're not teachable, and teachable doesn't mean to necessarily be persuaded by everything around you, but there's a lot of things as we get older and I don't mean older like you have to be over 40. I mean, think about what you thought was true when you were 10 and then 20 and then 30. There's unlearning that has to happen during the course of our lifetime in addition to learning. And sometimes we've been taught things the wrong way, or we assumed we knew them and they were incorrect information. So there's an expansion that happens if you allow it in.
What role does shame play in all of this? When I feel down in the dumps, when I feel like I'm insufficient, when I look at all my peers doing better than me and I need a second income and I need a second house, like what role does shame or jealousy or guilt or
Okay, well,
insufficiency play in all of this? Is that too negative?
is it, well, you tell me, okay, is it too negative? The only sin is comparison.
Okay.
It is such a colossal waste of time. Think about it. The only thing that you should seek to improve is yesterday's version of
Hmm.
Cooper. That's it. You keep it that simple, and your life will just like it will be so happy and so enriched because you will just be chasing what was you yesterday. That's all you need to do. The minute we start looking and envying other people, you have to say, like, well, what is that about? What, and are you not considering what you have? I mean, that whole thing, like that old saying, attitude of gratitude, don't forget it, right? Because when we're living in jealousy, we're really living in a lack of gratitude. And I just think that that's no way to exist, to tell you the truth. I'm not grateful for everything that happens. You know what makes me so happy is that today I am grateful for things that I used to think that I didn't like. And a lot of that could be around discomfort because when I'm in discomfort, what I know I'm in, and I'm not talking about bang your toe on the bed frame. I'm talking about the emotional discomfort that comes from stretching. Go, huh? This got my attention. I don't necessarily like it, but you know what? I also know it's temporary. And I also know I'll be better on the other side of it. Now, shame is a whole nother thing. Like to be shameful of what? Look at like what were your motives? What are your intentions? Are you when you say shame, are you talking about embarrassment? There's different ways to define these things. You'd have to be more specific, and then I'll coach you right through it right here, Cooper, live on the show.
Yeah, I don't know if shame is necessarily the right word for me, but
Yeah.
I do experience some of those other emotions. I'm lucky in my career, I would say, and I do practice gratitude. But there is some times where I look back at my old self and I feel shameful about how I acted, But I guess the acceptance and the growth and not dwelling is kind of the way to reframe that, right? Um,
Well, I mean, we're all going to look back and say, "Gee, wish I did that a little differently." I mean, ouch. But you know what? When you learn that lesson, that's information you can use forward, right? So there's a whole chapter in the book WTF: Wisdom Through Failure. Look, we are
Hmm.
human beings. We are fallible. That is going to happen. We're going to make certain choices and say, shouldn't have done it that way. And that's okay. I mean, how else are you going to get better at something or grow? You
yeah,
know?
yeah.
So.
So where do you find that balance between faking it until you make it and then actually being confident enough, right? Because I think that's part of it. When you pivot, especially if you're changing a career or something like that, don't have necessarily the big book of experience in that industry per se, but you're trying to negotiate and sell your skill set. So I guess how does one go about that?
The whole fake it that you make it, I mean, I see value in that, in as much as we have to kind of like play that role before we actually do it seamlessly, right? We have to have a
Hmm.
certain belief. And I think that that helps assuage fear. Fear is a real thing,
Hmm.
right? So when I'm stepping into something, like when I started to do more public speaking, it was just like, oh, dear God, I don't have a whole lot of practice in this. What does that look like? Now I can talk to anybody. I'm probably one of the biggest social butterflies you'll ever come across. And because my job for years required it, in commercial real estate, I would be sent to all sorts of conferences and there'd be 1,000 people in a room I didn't know and, go find deals. And so I got
Hmm.
comfortable with it with practice. But then the public speaking part looked a lot different, right? Because everybody's just staring at you. Well, I had to recognize right away, like, you're just not going to be great at it until you go through it. I mean, the thing is, there's no shortcuts, and you learn what you do well, and then you learn what you don't, and then you work on those shortcomings, and that's all there is to it. What I do today and what I tell people when it comes to fake it till you make it, just don't live in ego. EGO,
Hmm.
edging goodness out. And when I say ego, I don't mean just inflated ego. I'm talking to sometimes we put ourselves down. And that
Hmm.
also is ego because it's living itself. So if you're like, oh, boo boo, poor me having a pity party, you're still thinking about yourself. Get out of that. Get out of that mind frame, especially if you're going to do something that's, work related, that's service centric. And public speaking is service service centric. It's not about you. It's about them. Be prepared. What are you delivering? And because that comes up all the time. I coach people through how do you feel more comfortable? And I'm not professing to be an expert at public speaking so much as I'm a savant on what holds us back and how to get over that. That I know. I know that not just because I studied it, because I actually do it, right? So I'm just like, this is how it happens. So, fake it till you make it. It's like, just don't lie. I don't believe in lying.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the extension of that, and it's something my wife went through when she took on some bigger roles than she realized that she was getting into. It's the imposter syndrome, right? So let's say
Mm.
you faked it till you made it now, and you've had the job for a little bit. You've even impressed some people. And now they give you an even bigger project, but then you take a step back and you're like, wait a second, am I even capable of this? How did I get here? How do we tackle that?
Yeah, so imposter syndrome is really interesting because that the condition or whatever you want to call it itself, really what that means at its core, it's that people that are technically capable of doing something feel that they're not, okay, or they can't live up to the expectation. So nobody that is like totally not competent to do it is having imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome
Exactly.
resides for like, guess what, you can do it. Everybody else is saying you can do it. Do you know what I mean? And you're
Exactly.
thinking that you can't. And that's extremely common. And I also think it's seasonal. And I don't mean with the weather. We're not talking about, spring and summer, but I think that it's seasonal in our lives. And a lot of times the outside influences impact us. We could be going through something in our personal life that makes us start to question our worth and our capabilities or our decision making. I have coached individuals who maybe are going through divorce or health crisis, and they feel a sense of not being in control. So it impacts
Hmm.
their job performance because all of a sudden they don't really know who they are, and how could I have made some of these bad decisions. And so it's like a spillover, but all of it you can work through. But yeah, they're real conundrums for sure. But they don't have to own us. They don't have to own us.
I have a question. So obviously, as a coach, you deal with a lot of people that are coming to you. They're probably stuck. They probably have some habits or beliefs that are holding them back or whatnot. I'm wondering if you ever speak with someone and what the relationship between coaching and therapy is. My wife and a lot of my family are big proponents of therapy and talk therapy, and I've
Hmm.
never really resonated with it. I've actually had negative experiences with it and like to run away, but
Yeah.
I've never experimented with a life coach. And I feel like
Yeah.
that might be a better solution for some people. Have you found that?
As a coach, what I do is I don't tell anybody what they should do. I extract from them the answers that are like way, way down deep inside. And my focus is mostly around careers. So I'm an
Isn't that what the
executive
therapist
coach.
does?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I've been in therapy. I was in marriage therapy or counseling years ago. I've actually had some good it's been gosh, 15 years since I've been in therapy. Not to say I haven't needed it. I will tell you this. I think everybody like should have like, the budget for a therapy. I think there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely a therapeutic component to what it is I do, but it's mostly focused on the career. Do we talk about family and kids and all? Yeah, absolutely, because it impacts where their mental
Right.
state is. Um so there are a number of people, now that I'm thinking about it, that I coach that also have a therapist. It's not like an either or situation. So how they're handling their modalities and whatnot, that's their thing. And they could all look very, very different in what, the exercises and the work and the eye movement. And I mean, there's so many things that therapists can do that I'm not trained to do, nor am I looking to do. Uh, So,
Hey, I
but there's,
read books and listen to podcasts and watch documentaries. So I guess
yeah.
it's a similar comparison. What about the people who refuse? Like they really want to change. They really are dying to do this, but they just can't take the discomfort. What do you tell those people?
I don't coach those people. So, well, no, no, and it's
That's a great
I
answer.
no, I actually no, I have actually released. I don't want to say fired. Released people. Well, because here's the thing: it's not so much that they're wasting my time as they're wasting their money. Give me a good case all day long. I can go. I can go. I mean, because that's that lawyer training from years ago.
Right.
Like, so it's not even that I tire of them. If anything, I feel a certain amount of empathy that they're not ready. But until they're willing to do the things that they need to do, I'm not taking your money. And if you're not showing up, I've let people go because, they get too busy. Like we're talking about career professionals that have to have these busy schedules and do a lot of traveling, and all of a sudden they're not making their appointments. They're still paying me. They're not making it. And then I'll be like, okay, that's been 4 in a row. Like, are you going to prioritize this? Well, I have to do this. Okay, I release you because I'm not going to keep taking your check if you're not going to work with me. I mean, that's how I feel. I don't need money that bad. I don't need money that way. It doesn't sit well with me, so I don't do it. But yes, I always like money. Everybody send me money. I've got no problem with money. I mean, I don't think I could have too much, but
Cash
I
App
don't.
below.
I won't accept it if I'm not making an impact on you. So that's the. And here's the thing. I'll have people find me, maybe read my book, and then they reach out and they're like, oh wow, and then they love the first conversation, and they're like, send me the contract. And they already know before I send them the contract what it costs. So it's never really about like that. There's no sticker shock there. And I'm really quite reasonable, and that's about to change. So what happens is that moment of like stress or rock bottom like has kind of like softened or passed, and they don't want to do the work, like, because guess what, some of this is very icky
Right.
because I'm going to hold you like
Hmm.
the first thing that I do is I give out like a 2-page questionnaire, and you're invited to answer as thoroughly as you want, and if you don't want to answer all the questions, fine, but they're a deep dive into who you are and what you stand for, what your fears are, how do you get your relief? I mean, if you're going to be really honest with me, I can do great work with you, or we can play charades. I mean, it's really like it's up to the
Right.
person, but it's not. It's a big person moment, because there's a vulnerability factor to when you're in coaching. Probably just like when you're in therapy, I guess. Maybe some people shy away for that reason. But here's the thing: it has to be the right relationship. And right? Same thing. Think about your friendships. Think about your marriage. It has to be the right person. Same thing with a coach. Same thing with a therapist. I'm East Coast. I'm a no BS, transparent coach, and I'm gonna, hold you accountable. I'm also very loving. I'm very supportive. You're going to see somebody who just is like right there in the messy middle with you, and they know it. And so, and that's great. And that will be for most people, but not all. And I'm okay with that. I'm not looking for all the people. I'm looking for the ones that I can actually help. Yeah.
It's like buying a gym membership and saying, well, I'm
Yeah.
going to get jacked now, but well, you have to actually put it in the work, right?
You do. You have to put in the work. And you know what? I'll tell you what, the work ends up being a little like I see clients getting lighter because of it, because I make it fun, because I put a lot of WTF terminology to it. There's a playfulness. I do believe in bringing humor into all of it. At the end of the day, if we don't give our pain some levity, we're not going to want to address it. We're
Hmm.
just not. And so I do make it fun, and I'm a giggler. Like I laugh a lot. I can be so serious, and then it's just like laugh, 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 because life is it's meant to be enjoyed, and we have to celebrate it. And the tough stuff doesn't always stay tough. It just doesn't. And I've got like the tools and resources to say, how are we going to get you to the other side? We're going to do this together. And we come up with methods, and I'm right there. I'm right there with them the whole way.
So so you came onto the career choice of coaching, and I think coaching is one of those things that yes, you can learn, just like other skills, and you can get better at it. But there's certain aspects to it. I think it's built into the person, and to be a good coach is just you have to be that way, born, if you will, into the
Yeah.
position. What are some of the things that you during these discovery moments, these pivots, what did you look inside and say? I feel that my best efforts forward is to coaching people. That's where I could provide, a lot of support and value into the world and being a contributing member of society.
Well, you know what? Just like the WTF language, that is now my brand, found me, so did coaching. And I didn't say, oh, let me no longer do commercial title insurance. I'll coach. A lot of people will morph into coaching because they're unhappy with their career. What ended up happening was in 2020, I was hired by an agency in New York for for title deals, for the relationships around acquisition, disposition, and that type of thing. And quickly, very, very quickly, they said, listen, we will pay you more. We want the title deals. That's why you get hired. You're in sales, business development. But we want you to coach the New York office, and you'll do it virtually from California. They had a very strong residential team, so seasoned salespeople that knew residential transactions really well, but they wanted to grow their commercial platform. The only thing I know is commercial real estate. I know nothing about residential when it comes to title insurance. And so
Hmm.
I thought, well, I don't know what I'm doing, but they're paying me more to do it. So let's go try. And it was in that moment that I started like to run the sales meetings and then individually coach weekly the team players. Okay. So I would get them together as a group and then I would also, track what they were doing and I was getting paid on their performance. And so what ended up happening was I fell in love with it. It was almost like taking mentorship to like the next level and
Sure.
then some, because now there was a responsibility around how well they did. And it wasn't so much I was driven by the extra money as I was driven by the, like this like insatiable need to help them and see them get out of their own way. It's easier for somebody on the outside to see somebody, where they're suffering. I have two coaches. I have a business coach and I have a book coach because I'm in the middle of writing my second book. I see the value in it. It's not like a doctor doesn't need a doctor, right? A coach needs a coach. And I will tell you, it blows my mind when I'm just like, wow, I didn't see that. And that's the whole point. So I see the value of this for myself as well. And I take full advantage of it. Um, so in coaching that team in New York, I recognized that I really, really liked it. And what happened was we all got, together and I thought, well, I'm going to get certified in coaching because just because I'm really good at this and I'm really intuitive, I can like kind of figure people out and not in a bad way, but like meet them and be there for them. I went through training. And so then I got certified in it and it was just on the side. And I mentioned it on a podcast that I'd been doing, the Unscripted Pivots podcast. And I think I put up it on LinkedIn, like, oh, look, I have a certification. And then people started to, women in particular, started to inbox me and say, oh, do you have room? Will you coach me? That was never my intention. I was coaching that other one because it was part of my job and I was just podcasting. And so I thought, oh, am I capable of doing that? And so I started to do that. So I was doing that on the side, maybe for one or two people while I was still doing commercial title insurance. So it was almost like a natural progression that when I decided to step away from title insurance as a career, that had already been there. It was something that was already brewing, and the WTF framework was already alive and well. So when I look back at like it like the universe was prepping me
Yeah.
for this moment. And because I have a lot of like, I can be very willful, right? I mean, I do the same
Yeah.
things that I coach people. I should have left title insurance sooner than I did. But when it's your persona and your identity, and when it's your paycheck,
Hmm.
we're reluctant to take that shift because what is that going to look like? We are very outcome based because we're humans. We want these crystal balls. We want to know that it's all going to be okay. And the truth is, we can't forecast that. We can kind of have a good guess about stuff. I came into this really like full time, not knowing what it was going to look like. But what I did know was that it was right because for the first time in a long time, I was honoring that intuitive voice, that pull that was saying, get your ass in gear, work hard, and this is what you should do. And from there, it's all happening. Now, does it happen overnight? No, you have to build. And I talk about this often. You have to be willing to fail. You have to be willing to be a beginner at something. I am like a semi-expert at certain things because I've been doing them for a long time. And then I have to be new at being an entrepreneur. What's it look like to do these spreadsheets? What's it look like to do, I don't know, the accounting aspect of it, like holy mackerel, right? There's things, that can be very frustrating because I'm not an expert in them. But I'm okay. I'm willing to learn, willing to fail. TF.
There you go.
Yeah.
You've probably seen that influencer Ashton Hall, the guy who's big and jacked and wears the vest and does the sprints. And at 4 in the morning, he's dunking his face in his bottled ice water. And the manosphere, if you will, is
Yeah.
prioritizing this morning routine and healthy diet or eggs and steak. I'm not sure how healthy
Mhm.
that really is, but I'm curious
Yeah.
if that kind of thing, like lifestyle choices or morning routine or habits, fall into your framework, and if you could share maybe one of your little tricks that you have or a habit that maybe grounds you every day.
Uh, I'm not religious. I grew up Catholic, right? And anybody reading the book will see that, like Catholic on steroids, nursery school, grammar school, high school. My grandmother lived in a rectory with a Catholic priest. I'd spend the summers there. So, but I'm spiritual is what I am today. And so the power of prayer is not lost on me. So one of the habits I have is, is praying. And I talk to God all the time. I mean, that's just kind of works for me because I live my life such that it's like I'm not really driving this bus. He is. I'm a conduit of what he wants me to do. And if you would have told me I would have been speaking like this a couple of years ago, I'd be like, no, like I love God and I revere God, but that's not necessarily true.
Right.
One once I embraced that as true, I will tell you, I could no longer see my limitations because it's not just me doing the things that I'm doing. And that is life changing. I mean, that is so life changing. And in as much as a human, I don't live as much in fear because I'm not just thinking, oh, this is all on me. We are limited in our capabilities and our resources on a daily basis. And today, I don't think it's my resources. It's his resources, and they to me are limitless. And so it's a very, very different thing. And I said this on another podcast recently, and like it got quite the attention, and I didn't think it would. I do. I wake up every day and I'm like, God surprised me. And that is how I live my life. I'm like, God surprised me. I embrace the curiosity, and not all the surprises are going to be pretty. I do some meditation. I do journaling. But what I will tell you is I don't do it perfectly. When I'm in a season of discomfort, like I was in 2023, when I was
Mhm.
on my knees because I literally was just crying because I didn't know how I was going to get out of the thick of it. Who wants to pay $50,000 to leave a job? Like there were certain things that were stopping me. And plus, I also knew I wouldn't take another one that looked like that. I would leave the whole industry. That was pretty damn scary. In those moments, I got really good at meditating. I got really good at journaling because I was seeking. And so, for anybody that's really going through the thick of something, you really have to get back to center. And how you do that, some people like the gentleman you just talked about, he has a good solid workout routine. He is expending his energy in a positive way that's strengthening him, not just physically, but mentally. The fortitude that you get from taking care of your body through working out, I mean, that cannot be underestimated. So I don't do any of it perfectly. What I do perfectly is I don't drink. Now, I will tell you, embracing sobriety, I've been sober now 7 years. When I put that down as I got a thumbs up for those of you who can't watch this, right? Thank you, Michael. Um, when I decided to take that route, because that was like a habit became it's so easy to slip into that, especially when you're in sales and stuff. And then I thought, oh wow, this isn't just something to do when you're relaxing or whatever. I said, this is problematic, and it was calling my name more than I wanted it to. So I got some help around that. I mean, I want to share publicly because I will do this mostly out of ego. I never got in trouble. I didn't get a DUI. I didn't go to jail. I didn't lose a job. Like none of that crap happened. But you know what did happen? I started waking up and looking in the mirror and saying, huh, I don't really have self-trust here. I don't have self-respect. I'm making choices or doing things and pushing the envelope in ways that I don't want to. And that didn't sit well with me. So when we go back to being envious or jealous of somebody else, I don't compare myself to others. I compare myself to yesterday's version of Danielle. Do you do better today? What choices can you make? And so being sober was one of those better choices where it was like, you know what, that worked for a while and now it doesn't. And owning that reality. It is really hard to change lifelong habits, but sometimes it's like it's time to go, and look at your new situation and do the best that you can. Yeah.
I like Mark Twain's quote, quitting cigarettes is the easiest thing in the world. I've done it 1,000 times.
Yeah, okay. Now, that I used to smoke. So, okay, okay, so I was born 1964. Okay, so I'm 60, and I'll be 61 in August. Dear God, but it's
Wow.
all good. Um, I tell you that because back when, in those days, you could smoke in restaurants, on the plane,
Yep.
I mean, like, I grew up around smoking parents, and we were all smoking, behind the convenience store at 12. I mean, it was like kind of just like what you're doing. None of my four kids ever smoked. It's just not even like something that like was mainstream, but it was mainstream. And so I did that. I gave up cigarettes. I smoked probably from the age of like 13, not a lot, you're doing it with your friends, you're hiding. But
Exactly.
as an adult, like by the time I was 16, 17, I was smoking until 2 days before I took the bar exam for law school. I'll never forget it. I looked at that pile of cigarettes. You lock yourself in a room for six
Yeah.
weeks and you get steady. And I was like, this is disgusting. I just looked, and then I just stopped. And which was bizarre to stop 2 days before you're going to take a 2-day exam. I know.
Yeah.
So, but it is highly addicting, and I don't want anything to own me. I don't want to be saying yes to something that I don't want to put into my body. And alcohol became that for me. And so I was like, yeah, gotta go, you know? And I take it very seriously to help other people who struggle with that.
You are now the second coach we've talked to on this show. The first being George Hayworth, who runs Elite Sentinel Coaching, which is a
Mhm.
men's program, obviously, and
Right.
focuses a lot on physicality. But one of the two things that you absolutely share in common, and something that doesn't resonate personally with me, but maybe I need to reevaluate, is the spirituality component.
Yeah.
The way that you said things don't happen to me, they happen for me, kind of
Yeah.
has that higher purpose meaning. And I think as we talk to more and more successful people here, there's a pretty common trend here. So it's interesting that it's not something that I know yet. I'm confirmed and I'm baptized. We've actually
Mhm.
been debating whether or not we're going to get my son baptized. Now he's almost 2. We're kind of getting a lot of push from the family, but
Sure.
it's not something that I'd ever even thought about. I thought it was actually a part of my life that I didn't want to pursue because it was a waste of time and energy. Um, but I think as I talk to people like you, Danielle, I learned that that's maybe not the case.
Yeah, even the fact, Cooper, that you are acknowledging this and that it's on your radar, that you noticed it, you're in a state of awareness, is telling you that it's speaking to you and it should be explored. Because you
Yeah.
could go this whole podcast and it like didn't mean anything; it would just be words, right? So,
Right.
Hmm.
Right.
seek out that which is like getting your attention is all I'm going to say. And when it comes to sacraments and things like going through the motions, that has more to do with religion and tradition, which is a beautiful thing, but I'm talking about spirituality, and
Sure.
that is
Sure.
very different. And so, and it, I'm not saying that I know how you should be spiritual. I know how I practice my
Right,
spirituality.
right.
That is a very, very personal thing. So you can generalize it like how you love your wife may not look how I love my husband. It's still love. So
Yep.
you find what works for you. But what I will tell you is when you surrender, and surrender is not giving up. It's a very different thing. When you surrender to something bigger than yourself, your world expands in a way that you could never even imagine. It's difficult to put words to it, but just seek it out is what I'm going to say to you. See where you could do it, and that doesn't mean to seek it out necessarily at churches, right?
Right.
It could be more in readings, and maybe it's Buddhism or something. I'm not sure, but there's a lot of writing out there, and I'm glad that you could. There's a little seed happening. So
Well, I
let me,
shared that Marcus Aurelius quote. Maybe it's time for me to read his history book. I'm blanking on the name of it.
yeah,
Reflections or something like that. I forget.
yeah.
As am
So
I
So
now. I'm kind of
Danielle, where can
yes.
people find your awesome book?
Well, the book is available on Amazon. It's doing extremely well. I'm so excited about it. So it right now it's on Amazon. And if you go to my website, unscriptedpivots.com, you can see all the ways to follow me. I'm on I spend a fair amount of time on Twitter, on X, and LinkedIn. There's YouTube. I don't really fortify all of that. I threw some videos up when I did the podcast. I'm on Substack. I'm on Instagram. I'm on all of that, but I don't have a social media manager. You get little bits and pieces here and there.
yeah.
But I found you through X, right?
X
Because
is
we
where
had,
we connected. Yes.
and that was so cool because there was another person on X that read the book. I had sent her
Yep.
the book, and then all of a
Shout out
sudden,
Aura. Aura is
yeah,
our
let's
friend.
let's
She's
shout
actually
out
a
to
close friend of mine. Yeah.
yeah. And so I just knew Aura from Spaces. I was on X probably for 5 months before I even knew they had conversations on there. I was dragged by another
Right.
commercial real estate person. I thought, do we need another place to post things? Like, no.
Right, right,
And
right.
I will tell you, it has been mind blowing because if it's like a TV channel, you can just turn the channel. You don't have to listen to everybody that's on those spaces, but you will find your peeps. And it's a big, beautiful thing. And the ripple effect is such that it led me to this opportunity to meet with you guys, talk to you on your podcast. And I celebrate that. So always just leave your heart open and your mind open and explore.
Thank you very,
Yeah.
very much for joining us.
Okay.
Yeah, we're
All
really
right.
grateful, Danielle. Guys, the link for the book is all in the
Mhm.
description here. And I just wanted to say, Danielle, I told you in the green room, but this book has like really nice paper.
Yeah,
Been reading a lot of books lately, and they sometimes like feel weird in the hand. This is a nice book. You
it
you
does.
invested
It
in the
has
quality of this book, so it's
yeah,
nice.
even the
So
the
now you make me
cover.
regret it because I usually am one to buy the books, and now I'm
Yeah,
really
the
left
Well,
out.
ebook.
you run out of shelf real estate. I feel you. I feel you,
But I'm
Michael.
gonna I'm
But
gonna have to
but it
carve
does.
out a
It has like
space.
a silkiness to it, and in
It
there
does,
too.
yeah.
Also, what's the fix, right? WTF? I go through all these different things. I'm going to end with this too. What I've been told, the feedback has been such that people will read it cover to cover, or maybe they don't even have time, but they'll revisit it and they'll just open it, and there's like these bite-sized, like nuggets of wisdom that I share in there that you can just give any other page and go, huh, that's what I need to hear today. So don't worry about reading from start to finish. Just let the universe practice your spiritual side, Cooper,
Huh?
and let the universe decide what it is you should read and have fun with it. All right, there you he's going through the pages.
Guilt is the first word I saw.
Oh, that's so funny. All right, well,
Awesome.
maybe you gotta do better there.
Yeah,
All right,
we'll
this
figure
was
it out.
so awesome. Such
was
a
great,
good
Danielle.
time, and I look forward to this relationship continuing.
Absolutely.
Yes.
The pleasure was equally
All right.
ours.
Yes,
Thank
this has
you.
been Elevated Thoughts.